Hej, hej, hej. Dzień dobry. Hej, poczekajmy jeszcze tak 30-60 sekund i jak tylko minie to 60 sekund, to zaczynam za chwilkę. Tak, żeby ludzie w razie czego zdążyli się zebrać jeszcze. Ale cieszę się, że wszyscy do nas dołączyli. Jest mi przemiło, przemiło mi jest, że będą się pojawiać osoby, że są chętni do uczenia się testowania. Widziałem już dzisiaj prezentacje, które inne osoby dawały, więc na propos testowania, więc też podoba mi się, że jest zainteresowanie tematem. No dobra. Dobra, to myślę, że nie ma co przedłużać, tak? Też cześć wszystkim. Nie ma co przedłużać intra, bo mamy ciekawą prezentację przed nami. Mam nadzieję, że tak to ocenicie. Ja jestem Michał Warda i dzisiaj będę opowiadał o automatycznym testowaniu w prawdziwych aplikacjach. W ogóle cała prezentacja będzie po angielsku, więc przełączam się na angielski i tyle. Dobra. Hello, I'm Michał Warda, and today I'll be talking about automated testing in real-world applications. I'm very happy to be a part of DevJS. And let's just jump into it. But before we start about the presentation itself, if you're interested in building cool applications, like a huge app that uses machine learning and is responsible for selling products worth tens of millions of dollars every month, or an app that communicates with IoT and works on the cloud functions, or an innovative news service that serves tens of thousands of users each day and uses bleeding edge technology, and many more, including fresh greenfields, new tech, DDD databases, React Native, Nest, React, whatever, you name it, we probably have it. If you're a designer, developer, front-end, back-end, PM, marketing person, hit us up after the meetup and in our booth. If you don't manage to reach our booth, at least check out our careers page at elpassion.com/careers. Okay, I'm Michał Warda, and I'm the CTO at Elpassion for some time already. I've worked here for 8 years, and today I'll be talking about automated testing in real-world applications. So let's start with the testing part of this topic. First, obviously, you need to understand what is testing before you jump into automated testing or trying to do it in real-world applications. So the simplified definition of testing, according to the internet, is that testing is a part of processes responsible for checking the quality of software. And it's supposed to validate and verify software. Verification allows to control if the created software is done according to the specification, and validation checks if software is filling the needs and expectations of the users. What is important here? Why did I even mention that this part? Is that for the purpose of this topic, we will drop the validation part, the validation topic. You can learn more about it during a UX training, etc. I've already seen a validation presentation today at DevJS about the UX part of it. It's a very important part of testing. So no matter what you do in the IT world, I suggest at least taking a look at it. Today we'll focus on verification. So let's verify something. And how I will verify is that I'll try to demo something, pray to the demo gods. I'll bring my browser here. Give me 1 second. I'm bringing my browser to the screen, and we'll try to verify something. The first thing we'll try to verify is that Google.com is working. Seems simple enough. I'll go to Google.com and I'll see that the site should turn on. It should allow me to search if I search for El Passion. It should, and press enter. I should be seeing El Passion records as on my screen as the results of the search. Seems simple enough. But I've just verified that Google is working and that El Passion is the first result. Later, I'll try to go to my prepared calculator app and I'll try to verify that certain parts of this calculator are working. I'll try to add two numbers. So I'll add 2 plus 3 and then I'll press equals and it should show me 5. Perfect. I also tried that the multiplication works. So let's say 5 times 6 again is 30. Brilliant. And I'll try the subtract function. Let's say we will get a negative number. I'll subtract 8 from 4. Okay, even here, I've managed to verify that my calculator can handle addition, can handle the multiplication, and could handle subtraction. One more thing that I will verify is that GitHub.com is working today. I'll go and check that if I ask API GitHub.com /user/Michał Warda, essentially me, I will get my user through the API of GitHub.com. So just to say it again, I've just verified that the GitHub API is working in a way that I was expecting it to work. And what we did during this very, very short demo, simplified demo, is that we've checked that someone's code is working according to the spec. So we verified, essentially we tested that that the code that someone else wrote is working. And you will be doing this a lot in your life. And I would say more that there is no software development without testing, unless the written code is never used, because no development of anything essentially is done without testing. If not you, the developer, will be testing it, then the user will be the first tester of the code. So essentially, everyone, when they use the application, they are verifying that it's behaving according to the spec. So everyone is doing tests. And if everyone is already testing the application, then it means that we already know how to do it. We shouldn't be scared of testing. Every single one of us knows how to test stuff. Some people are better at it. Let's say I know how to go to GitHub API and check if they respond with my username, but my grandma would probably have a problem with that. So some people are better with testing, and others are not that good with it, but everyone is doing it. It's not some magic. So we shouldn't be scared of it. And to prove, I'll rephrase it, to prove that we know how to write tests is that we can even write down what I just did. So the first test I did is that given we have our browser opened, I had my Brave browser opened. When we address Google.com address and we press enter, then Google.com shows up. Okay, this is the first test that we did. The second test that we did is that given we have Google.com opened, when we search for El Passion.com is the first result. And we also did a calculator test. Given we have a calculator opened, when we press 2 plus 2 and then equals sign, then the result shows up as 4. And same with multiplication. And with division, just the result is different. And with GitHub API, given we have access to GitHub API, so I can somehow ask it for data. When we get user Michał Warda data, so essentially visit the correct URL, then the JSON with correct data is returned. And what this means is that here we've just written 6 vastly different tests. We've written API test, one API test. We've written UI calculator test and a calculator logic test. And we've also written tests for Google. So whoever didn't fall asleep up until now for just first 10 minutes, now should understand that you are able to write tests already. So what can we use the superpower for? What can we use the superpower of testing in our application? First of all, let's move back to our point about what is testing and see that not only did we write tests, but we've also written a specification, because a specification is a set of scenarios describing a product. I'm simplifying it a bit here, but long story short, when you write tests, you're writing a specification. That's why sometimes the test files are called specs. So essentially what we just did is we wrote specification, but we also can simultaneously call it a test. At least in today's language. So knowing that we know how to write a specification in a way that it can also show us how to test certain stuff, we can smoothly move to the second part of our topic, which is automated. Because it turns out that some time ago, we found that something is able to effectively perform tests just like we did manually a moment ago, like I did with Google, my calculator, and the API. And we found out that there is something that can do it even better. It can click, it can visit Google, add, subtract, and compare values just like we do manually. And probably no one will be surprised that what we found out is that a computer can do it much better, much faster than us. So filled with this positive energy, knowing we know how to write tests, and write specification, let's try to implement it. So implement and automate the tests that we've written. And I will try to implement tests for the calculator first, and then we'll see how much time we have left, and I'll jump into the other ones. So first, I'll go to calculator spec, and I've already, you should see everything, hopefully. I've already given myself a head start in which I've written down what we just essentially did, but in an English language for my tests. So I'll describe addition. I'm using Cypress here as the testing framework. Cypress is a end-to-end testing framework. For the purpose of this presentation, it should handle all our needs. The describe keyword is used to group certain parts, certain tests. Oh, sorry, it should be calculate. The describe should group certain tests, and I've written essentially what I already did in my tests. So given that we have a calculator open, so the calculator is open, when I add 2 and 3, then the result is 5. I can write it down even just with you. I'll have because I don't have to use my head start here. So given calculator is opened. I don't have this function implemented yet. When I add 2 and 3, Again, I don't have this function open. Then result is simple enough. And now I can jump into implementing those functions. So calculator is opened. What this means in our automated testing world is that I have my calculator opened on URL localhost 3000. So I have to somehow get there to localhost 3000. So in Cypress, to implement it, we just run site visit, and I'll visit localhost 3000. When I add 2 and 3, means that I have to somehow click 2 and 3, etc. But before we do that, let's open our testing framework and see what is happening here. I'll launch only the calculator spec. Yes, the result is function is still not defined. I'll just define those functions, but they will stay empty for now. Add, and the result is 5. I'll also implement this. Okay. So when I launch this tests, the correctly adds integer test passes, subtracts passes, and multiplies pass, because all they do is just visit a page. And yeah, it's there. So I'll try to add 2 numbers now. And how do I do it manually? How do I add 2 numbers manually? I click 2, then I click plus, then I click 2. So I need to somehow find a button that contains the left number. So 2. Then I have to click it. Then I need to find the plus sign and click it. And then I need to find, again, the button that contains the right number. And again, click it. And at the end, I need to find the equals button and click it. So let's see how this works now. I'll refresh the page. Okay, and we can see that the 2 was clicked, then the plus was clicked, then the 3 was clicked, and then the equal sign was clicked. And even the 5 showed up, but we didn't test that it showed up. So the last thing that I need to do is just test that the 5 showed up. So I'll check that my element with the screen, because here my class that I'm wrapping this div in is called screen. I'll check that there is a screen class that contains the result. So essentially what I've written here is that when the calculator is opened, when I add 2 and 3, so I click left plus right equals, and then I check if the result is correct, then it should be working. Okay. I see that we have a small problem here. It's not called screen. Maybe I did a typo. Give me 1 second. I should have a backup implementation of this. Oh, sorry, not sci contains, sci get, because I'm searching for the element through a class. Okay, and the adds works correctly. Subtracts doesn't work accordingly because we didn't implement it, and similarly multiply. So what I'll do is I'll implement the subtracting and multiplying. We can say that subtracting, I have a space to do it already. Subtracting will do, or multiplying will do the exact same thing, but with a star sign, and subtracting will do the exact same thing, but with a minus sign. And what I did is I've written 3 tests for my very simple application, but I've managed to write 3 tests for my calculator. So let's go back to our presentation. And now we've checked that we've implemented a few tests. This, again, is a superpower. What can we do with this skill? It turns out that automated publication of new software versions based on status can be used when you already have tests. You can minify the manual QA testing process. You can monitor if the app is correctly working on production, because you can, for example, hit the production server with those tests. And you can increase the quality of the code based on the fact that our code has to be testable, which is a separate topic for a separate presentation. And when you already know this, you know how to implement tests. We've implemented it for the calculator. In a moment, we'll implement it also for the API endpoint and Google. When we know all this, you'll hit the wall of in your company when you can implement those tests. And because everyone from every approach will tell you that you don't have time to write tests, you don't have time to write specifications, but it turns out, and they'll base it on a very simple assumption, is that it takes more time to write tests than to not write tests. But as we've proven, writing tests does not take much time. Writing the specification does not take much time because, and moreover, we need to write those if we like it or not, because if we won't write it, then we will not know if certain things that we've delivered are behaving in a way that we expected it to behave. So we won't be able to communicate with each other, for example, the product owner or even the stakeholders, if the application is working as expected. So specification needs to be created, and it's already created before the code will be written. Sometimes it's in someone's mind already, but usually if we write acceptance criteria or we write a exact specification, it's already there. So assuming you will have the specification written, or it takes very small amount of time to write it, the remaining question is when to implement the specification and if you should do it at all. So if you should automate your tests. And whenever you'll get this question, you will you'll get to this question, you'll get a famous graph. And this graph can look like the one on the left or right, or similarly. And it turns out that it's just a it's not based on any meaningful research, scientific research. And what those graphs assume is that writing automated tests is more costly than manual testing, and that at some point in time, it's not. And it's based on horse sense. That's why you don't see any numbers on those graphs besides the 0. And the question is, at what point in time this magical point appears when it's worth it to write tests or not worth it? Is it after a week? Is it after a month? Is it after 3 months? Is it after a day or even an hour? No one knows that, and there is no research saying that at this point in time and this types of projects, it's worth it to write tests or not. So maybe if the potential gain of having those tests automated is so big that just how we've mentioned it before, and maybe because writing tests as we've seen it is not that complicated, if you have the right tooling for it and the right approach, then maybe instead of rolling the dice and not doing them at all, we should just try to optimize our tooling and skills so that it's always worth to write them. So essentially move this this point to the left side as much as possible. And it turns out that there are people doing that, and that people are trying to do that all the time. And what I've just shown you is an example of a tool that the Cypress tool that showed up in the near past, at least from my perspective, that optimizes writing certain types of tests vastly and increases the speed of it. So from this part, I'll move to the automated testing in real world application. So let's jump to the demo and see all of the other tests, how they are implemented, because I've managed to write a test for the simplest calculator. Now I'll try to write the test for the Google spec. So going back to our Google spec, similarly, here I've described the code as Google is working, essentially. So I've written a test that Google shows up. So again, given our browser is open, when I visit Google, then Google shows up. And here I have the placeholders for those functions. First of all, when is the browser opened? It's always opened when I use Cypress, but I still have it in my test setup so that when I read it in English, it's easier to understand what is happening rather than just visit Google and then Google shows up. So the browser is opened. I just leave a comment that it's always opened and we don't have to do anything here. Visit Google. Similarly to what I did previously, I go to Google.com. And I can, because when I go to Google.com in my Cypress tool, amazing Cypress tool, here in my Google spec, you can see that because it's the first time I'm seeing Google, I get this huge model saying that if I'm okay with agreeing to sign a pact with the devil. So I do. Oh crap! It's back. I thought my ID frozen. So when I visit Google, I go to Google and I click the Zgadzam się click. Obviously, it's simplified for the purpose of this presentation. Don't worry, you can, in different languages, specify different I18N. You can find it by tags, etc., etc. This is just a simplification. So when I visit Google, it shows up. Yes, I'm visiting Google. So now I'll implement I have the browsers opened. I have visit Google, and then I need to implement the Google shows up. For me, Google shows up when I see the Google logo at the center. So I have it written down that there is a image that has a Google in it, the alt Google in it, and it should exist. So I go to the page, I click, and Google shows up. Perfect. So my first test is ready. Google is showing up and it's tested. Then I can check that returns El Passion as the first result when we are searching for it. Given Google is opened, okay, what is Google is opened? Google is opened is empty. So I need to check when is Google opened. So Google is opened when Google shows up, essentially. So in my test, I can compose previous parts of code that I already had. So I visit Google, and when Google shows up, then Google is opened. So given Google is opened, when I search for El Passion, okay, how to search for El Passion in Google? I just need to find the input. Input title equals, in Polish it's szukaj. I type the query because I've passed the query as the parameter, search for El Passion. So I can look at what's happening. Okay, it's written El Passion. Now I just need to click Szukaj w Google here. So I will find the input that has the title Szukaj Google. Whoops, sorry. This, find the input that has this title. I need to grab the first input because on the page there are two of those, and I can click. So when I see this, I can see that. Oh, again, I'll use my handy dandy. Oh, yeah. I need to find the input where value is Szukaj w Google. Back to this part. It should click it, and I should go to the results, and I'll check if El Passion is here somewhere in the title. So I'll check that the first result is El Passion. So I'll go copy it already because this is mumbo jumbo because I'm testing someone else's page. In Google, each of the records on the list has a tag called data HVEID. And I grab the first one and I check that it contains the result. So that the first result is El Passion. So now I'll see if my tests pass. And yes, they do pass. I can check each of those steps. And I can see that this first title contains El Passion. Okay, so we've written a test for our calculator. We've written tests for Google. Now let's write a test for GitHub API. I can check that the API is available. And then when I request get user Michał Warda, then the ID, I'm checking here to simplify, checking that my ID is 8479334. So I can start implementing it. What it means that API is available. Again, and Cypress API is always available, so it's always available. I could check that, for example, GitHub does not respond with something. I can have a health check ping here, but for the presentation of the purpose of this presentation, I won't be doing that. And now I can get user. So here I'll return the request because Cypress allows to request. I'll get a HTTP, HTTPS, API GitHub.com users and username, and then IDEs will be checking that when the request is done, then the response. Again, I'm simplifying with any here. I expect the response body ID to equal ID that I've specified. So again, to get back to it, given that the API is available, when I get user, then the ID of this user should be this ID. And I can check this test if it's passing. I'll open my GitHub spec. It worked just to check it that it works correctly. I'll break it, and as you can see, my ID is not equal to this one. It's equal to this one. I can also, just for the purpose of testing, I'll check here that it's in fact 8479334. Okay, so we've managed to write a test for an API, we've managed to write a test for calculator and Google, and we've managed to implement and automate all of those tests. It's been only 30 minutes and we've done all of that. And the last thing I'm gonna do is that we can try to write, because our calculator is working perfectly for now. I'll go back to my calculator. It's working perfectly. I can add 2 and 9, and it gives me 11. And I can add, similarly, I can multiply, etc., just how I did previously. And now I'll break it. I know that the logic is very simple here, but I'll break it. Let's say I didn't look at it. But I can use this. I'll just export my calculator logic here. And I can see that my calculator has stopped working. At least should stop working. Okay, it says that my logic does not return numbers, obviously, because it doesn't compile, but I'll return some random numbers. Return 10, go with 10 here. So I can check that when I rerun my tests, that the test with adding does not work, the test with subtracting does not work, and the test with multiplying does not work. So I can now, let's say I don't launch the browser itself, I can close the tab here. I can try to, with the magic of tests, only write an implementation. So what is addition? Addition is adding left to the right. I can save, and hopefully my tests will say that adding works correctly. Yes, I've managed to do that. What is a subtraction? Subtraction is a way of subtracting. What is a subtraction? Subtraction is subtracting left from right. It's working. And what is multiplication? Multiplication is multiplying. I have to find a better example, more complicated one than this. But what this checked is that in my workflow, I can even start with tests that are automated and then implement the whole logic based on it, which essentially, with some additional steps, is test-driven development. So we've just implemented a web calculator logic, never even launching the browser. And I mean, we did, but in my tests, but not manually. And what does this skill give us? And how should you approach testing? What is the ending of this presentation? The purpose of this presentation is for all of you to understand that everyone should learn how to write tests, and everyone should write tests, and everyone already knows how to test. They just need to learn how to write those. And then, so essentially the specification. Then it's the second step. Start by writing tests and later implement them, not the other way around. Don't try to start with implementing tests and then trying to build a specification around it. It's much easier to do it the other way around, as I've just showed you. Automate ASAP, because the moment when it will be worth it is impossible to predict. There is no scientific research and no clean line when it's worth it or not worth it to start automating your tests. And the last thing that I would like to forward to you is to pick frameworks, components, tools, modules that support testing and have it documented. If you're thinking about picking a certain tool and you go to the documentation and it does not even have a section on how to test this part, you should not pick this tool. Try to find one that already has some documentation about it, and it's not just a forward to another library, etc. Every part of code that you write should be testable. Okay, that's been all from me. I was very happy to present. Do you have any questions? We'll see. As a manual tester, should I learn how to run automated testing or should I stay away from that? As a manual tester, you should also learn how to automate. As a manual, I mean, I'm not a tester myself, so I don't wanna. I mean, I'm testing automatically, but I've learned how to write those. But my job is to develop code, and I can say that as a tester, as the whole role, you should be able to check the application if it's working correctly, and you should check not only the verification part but also the validation part. So you should be checking if the application is working according to the to how the user expected it to work. So you can manually, and it's probably the best solution, manually validate that the application is working in a way that it's supposed to work, just how you expect it to work. So when I open the browser and I go to Google.com, I'm used to it that when I see a huge bar search at the center, when I type into it and press enter, then I will be shown the results. If the application works exactly different, then it doesn't pass the validation part, which this part is usually tested manually. Similarly, for example, visual bugs, etc., are also tested manually. But when it comes to stuff that is repeating itself, then you can easily find tools that will speed up your workflow a lot, and you can then focus on testing the hard parts, just like validating and seeing if the business logic makes sense. I hope that answers your question. Any more questions? What do you think about writing some automated tests by JS Dev? How comparable do you think it should be to work for of QA engineers? I think the answer is similar to what I said. For me, a QA engineer is a person that is responsible for helping the project team to deliver the most user value to the user. If a certain part of the application is done in a way that it's impossible for the user to pass through it, and there can be multiple reasons for it. For example, it can be too complicated from a user experience perspective, or it can be very slow, or it can be, I don't know, in a different language. I don't know, like certain parts of this flow are not possible to reach for the user, then the QA engineer is responsible for ensuring that the team is building the product that the users need, want, and know how to use. This is the mark for quality for me. And when it comes to writing tests, I think everyone should be writing tests. Here, for example, when I'm writing backend code, I'm not even launching the server because I write contracts that say that my front end, client consumes. So I don't have to test through the client application if my backend is working, and I don't use tools like Postman, etc., because I can write a automated test for it once, and I don't have to manually use the tools that handle that. Of course, this requires some skill, but it's worth it. It's definitely worth it. So I think JS devs should or must write tests, both unit tests and integration tests, etc. Okay. what if I'm not into coding or don't know it, but would like to know about automation testing? Is there a path for me? Definitely. I know you're not into coding. What I did here is using the Cypress tool. Cypress itself has a vast documentation. There are also other tools that you can use where you essentially click through the application. So you can have the because you can there are things that can record your behavior. So for example, let's say that here I visit Google. There are, let's say you have a browser application. There are tools that you can say, okay, record me now. And when you type into Google comment to the URL address, press enter, then it will output this code. Then when you click the button, just how you do in your browser, then it will output this code, etc., etc. It will not produce probably such a nice looking test. Oh, sorry, I've been showing code, but the window was not focused. I'll go back to it. So essentially, you can have a tool that when you write the URL into the URL bar, the address, it will output this code. And later, when you will do, for example, addition, it will output this code. And then when you'll try to compare two numbers, because you can, for example, mark something and say, I'm looking that this is the correct result, it will output this code. It will probably not be so nice to write a test like this. So it probably will not be in such an English way as a specification, but you can definitely have tools that already output this code without writing a line of code. For the more complicated stuff like authentication, etc., it can be more cumbersome to do it without coding, but it's definitely possible. If you would like to search for it, it's called, the topic is called test recording or something like that. I can check it up later. You can hit me up on Twitter or mail, and I can give you more information about how those tools work for that. Hope that answers your question. Do we have any more? You mentioned that Cypress is an amazing tool. Can you compare that in the long story short to other tools? Okay. I think that Cypress is probably one of the best tools for front-end developers to start testing their applications, because it simplifies a lot of stuff and handles all of the stuff that is required to start writing tests. You can build complex scenarios with Cypress. You don't have to worry about async await. As you can see, all the stuff that is happening in the browser, if I write this test like this, are happening not exactly when I launch this function, but in an async way. So it simplifies a lot this whole process of writing tests, integration tests. Though it comes at a cost. The cost is that those tests are slower. So if your application is huge and you want to be sure that all your critical flows are covered, or all your flows are covered, let's start with this assumption, then it might take a lot of time for all of those tests to pass. Of course, it still will be faster than when you do it manually, if you were to do it manually, but it will take a lot of time for those tests to pass. So comparing Cypress to other tools, it's very user friendly. It gives a set of amazing tools, but it's kind of slow compared to other tools. So if you were to write, if you're more advanced, I would say, you can try to use the tools for the specific framework you're using. So for example, there is a testing library for the front-end part. You can use testing library that will render all of the stuff in a virtual browser, which speeds up a lot of stuff because it doesn't have to calculate styles, etc., and it simplifies the whole code. Similarly, on backend, I've created a request spec here, but on backend you will have more advanced tooling to write specs for backend servers that handle authentication. And if you were to write it from the perspective of the backend server, so I'm not hitting it from the outside, but from the inside, I'm trying to make requests or hit specific services. It can also simplify. It can also speed up the tests and make sure that you're testing only the stuff that you exactly want to test, because this end-to-end solution tests everything. Hope that answers your question. Do we have anything more? Is the choice of a specific framework important? Yes, it is, both for backend and for frontend. I'm not sure if you're asking for the testing framework. The testing framework choice is also important. I'm a huge fan of all of the super hip front-end frameworks. I've been coding for a long time, and I was very happy when React showed up, for example. But when React showed up, you had to wait like 2 or 3 years before any testing tooling showed up. So when you're doing like serious business applications, and I've showed this graph when at a certain point in time it turns out you need to have tests, otherwise your tempo slows down a lot when you try to add new features. It turns out that if you in React, for the first 2 years when I tried to create application creations, it was the amount of work added, the amount of time added to developing single feature, every single feature was huge. I mean, I could have done it much faster in different frameworks. I had a lot of fun doing it and writing even my own test helpers, etc. But it was essentially waste until the community reached the point of when they knew how to test. You can see similar things right now with, for example, Svelte. Svelte is a brilliant framework that has essentially close to zero documentation about how to test it. I'm smarter now, so when I pick a framework for a commercial product, I check if testing is supported. Right now, Svelte is out of the scope, because even though it's super nice, it's out of the scope because I don't have time writing all the tooling. I mean, writing tests like more complicated scenarios, if I didn't have a good tooling for it, would take ages, and I don't have ages when I'm building a product for my clients. Yeah. Okay, any more? Oh, super many questions. Cool. What are the other worth looking alternatives to Cypress? I think I've answered this question, but I'll just ensure. You can look at, if you want to go into faster frameworks, you can try testing library, and how do they do it. On backend, you can look essentially at Jest on backend, and for the specific framework you're using, like this. This is obviously from the JavaScript perspective. From other tools that are very other different frameworks for that, I know that there is also Test Cafe. I've used it in the past, but I didn't like it because it doesn't handle the async stuff as well as Cypress does. There is also other tools. If you Google Cypress alternatives, you can look at it. When you're trying it out, just try to recreate like those 6 scenarios that I did. Those check all of the typical test cases that you do in your application. Let's check out in this framework the full stack end-to-end framework. Okay, any more questions? That's all questions. Super. I'm very happy that I received so many questions. It means at least someone was listening. Very, very happy. And I'm very happy that I had the opportunity to give this presentation. Hope to see you soon. I've been Michał Warda, and bye.